If you're a startup founder raising funds, one of the most important things that an investor wants to see is your cap table. Well, what's a cap table? It is the authoritative ledger that shows the exact ownership of all company shareholders. The cap table should include preferred stock, common stock, stock options, convertible securities, warrants, and any other stock obligations. It needs to be accurate, which is hard to achieve because cap tables can be very complex. It needs to be clear and with data that's easily understood. It must be complete, including all stock and stock rights. And it needs to be detailed, covering dozens of low-level data points about each stakeholder's position. And it must be fully diluted, meaning it includes all possible agreements that could impact company ownership. Problems with your cap table can kill an investor's interest, make you look sloppy, and are costly to clean up. I'm Sam Wong, and I'm a Silicon Valley angel investor, as well as a startup coach and fractional founder. I've done 5 startups with 3 exits. I play a dual role as an investor operator in the startup space. As an angel investor, I need to be careful in picking which startup is worth an investment check. As an operator, I help founders become fundable, then raise startup funds. Think cap tables are trivial back office details? Well, let me tell you what happened when I was a first-time CEO selling my 4th startup. We hired an investment bank to help with the acquisition. We pitched 8 potential buyers and got 5 offers. When doing due diligence on one of the buyers, we identified a problem with their cap table. Even though the offer looked good, we didn't take their deal because of the cap table issue we found. 2 years after we were acquired by a different company, I discovered that the problem on the buyer's cap table metastasized. Most of the stockholders in that company got washed out, meaning their equity stake pretty much went down to 0. I would have lost everything if we hadn't found that cap table problem. This video shows how to use our cap table tool from our startup due diligence class. If there's sufficient demand, we may also release this tool as part of a cap table mini class. Why do I have a cap table tool? Because most cap table spreadsheets are woefully inadequate. Most spreadsheets are not built by people who understand what an investor looks for when evaluating a cap table, what a lawyer checks when doing due diligence on a cap table, and don't make it easy to analyze scenarios or create pro forma models. Our cap table tool can be used by early stage companies and is focused on presenting in a readable format the core information that investors and lawyers need to assess the state of the cap table and the company ownership. Let's dive in. Hello, we're here to do a quick walkthrough of version 4.2 of our cap table spreadsheet. It's a tool which is included in our startup due diligence best practices and toolkit class. And if there's enough interest, we may also include it in a separate cap table mini class. But what we wanted to be able to do was provide a high-level walkthrough, not getting into lots of low-level details about the features, but just to give you a quick sense of what is captured here. So I'll make some comments about the tool itself later, but let's dive into some of the information captured. So there are 2 major tabs. Well, there's a README tab here, which has notes as well as version history. And then there's a stock and options tab. This is where you'll probably spend most of your time in capturing and assessing some of the data. This stock and options tab has basic information about the stakeholder. Then in the light blue section here, it has information about stock holdings that stakeholder might have, might actually own. Specifically, the type of stock would be common stock, preferred stock, and RSAs, restricted stock awards. So this is basically instruments that are stock or stock equivalents pretty much at the time that they are granted. We'll get into the detail of what's captured in that section in a moment. But then after that, in the green section here is where we capture stock options. Okay, and it's not just options, but stock options, RSUs, and warrants, or instruments that would become stock at some point in the future. Then the purple section of this spreadsheet is the total ownership stake. It's the sum of that of the stock and stock options, basically, and some additional ancillary information. So let's get into some of the detail about what's captured, starting with the stock. Okay, so you have total number of shares, which then does an auto calculation on outstanding or fully diluted, and they are different calculations. They mean slightly different things. Here you would specify what type of shares, and in most cases it will be common stock. If you have had a round of preferred investment, then somebody may actually hold preferred stock, or if you've in some cases granted RSAs to individuals, then you can capture that here in this column H. Okay, and you may notice that depending on whether you have RSAs or common, that changes some of the calculations. You may notice that the percentage fully diluted changed slightly. Okay, so that's some of the low-level detail about the math that's already built in. It's nice also in that it captures vesting details. Okay, so there's vesting duration, the cliff, the start date, which then auto calculates the total vested shares and unvested so far and the percent of that which is vested. That vesting is based on this date right here in cell E3. So by default, the vesting date, the vesting accuracy date is as of the date that the spreadsheet's open, but you can change that to whatever date you want. Let's say you wanted to go back in time to February 1st, 2025, and then the amount of shares vested and unvested may change because of the vesting calculations. So I'm going to undo that change, and you can watch real quick the vested, unvested shares recalculate. Okay, I just undid it, and hopefully you noticed the vested and unvested shares automatically recalculate. In addition to vesting detail, there's some important legal stuff like the board approval date. If there is no board approval date, then technically the grant is not fully consummated. And then there's one thing that's very important for most investors is that they want to be able to understand the 83B status, whether the individual, if they're eligible for an 83B filing, whether they have done that. I'm not going to spend time here discussing what an 83B election is, but it's an important tax election that will save the individual stakeholders potentially a good amount of money on their taxes. It's important enough that investors care about it, because if this wasn't handled correctly, it's very often that the individual will ask the company to somehow fix their tax or help them to overcome some of the tax problems that come when you when you haven't made your 83B election on a timely basis. So many investors do like to know what the 83B status of each individual stakeholder is. Okay, and then issuance price and total issuance price per share and the total transaction price of the entire issuance. Okay, so that's all captured in the stock area. In the stock options, of course, number of options, and then that auto calculates into fully diluted shares. There's various types of equity rights. It could be incentive stock options, or non-statutory stock options, or non-qualified stock options. Again, I'm not going to get into the low-level detail of that, but basically ISO options can only be granted to employees. And if you have somebody who is a consultant getting stock options, they should be getting NSOs. And that's one of the reasons why, if you correlate this particular individual here, right, in row 15, is a consultant, so they're not an employee. And if you go all the way to the right, you may notice their options are NSOs, which is what they should have. So this is one place to be able to see the type of role that the individual plays and the type of options they have, so that you can catch situations where somebody might have been granted the wrong type of options and you're not accounting for it correctly. If it's not accounted for correctly, it's something that's going to need to be fixed so that you can't violate SEC issuance rules, etc. Okay, so in addition to the quantity of shares or options or whatever, and the type of equity rights, we also capture vesting, where vesting applies, and it usually does apply to the RSUs, to the options, usually not to warrants, but it does apply usually to options, both NSOs, ISOs, NSOs, and RSUs. Okay. So it also does the same calculation of number of shares or options that have been vested. Again, we also capture the board approval date for the same reason as mentioned earlier. There's an exercise price per share, and then the total calculation required, the total cash required to exercise the entire option grant if the person is eligible to do so. So the purple column here, purple columns here add up the content in the blue, and which is the common stock, as well as the options in the green. And you may ask, well, what's the big deal for adding this stuff up? Well, in some cases where somebody has both shares and options, you want to be able to see again the total holdings on a fully diluted basis and the total vested and unvested. This is a rather significant point, so I'm going to spend a moment on this. In column AK here, we have the total amount of shares that they hold that's vested. And it's conditional formatting. Basically, the conditional formatting rules are if it's more than 75% vested, the field turns red. If it's 50 to 75% vested, it's yellow. And then if it's 25% or less vested, it's green. And then if it's 25 to 50%, it's a white background, okay? And this is going to be important because the average investor wants to know for the key employees how much stock do they have unvested, which gives them an idea of how much of a financial tie there is to keep this employee employed at the company, okay? So as a company, as individuals and key employees get more and more vesting, the challenge is that there's less holding them to the company, and in some cases an investor will ask for that a certain individual or certain individuals to restart their vesting cycle. Okay, so that's the detail that's captured on a per stakeholder basis. There's also a number of summary, there's some summary data. There's of course the summary of common shares, RSAs, and preferred shares. Okay, we're going to spend a minute or so here talking about one little feature of the Excel spreadsheet. It's this area down here, which is calculating the number of shares outstanding or the number of percentage of fully diluted shares. There is a question floating around about what is included in shares outstanding, and by default it does not include shares allocated from the stock option pool. So that's why this field here in cell C114 is set to no. But if for whatever reason you want to include it, then you flip it to yes, and basically the number of shares in the stock option pool that have been allocated, in this case 600,000, does get included in the count of total outstanding shares, which then changes the percentage outstanding. If we flip it back to the default of no, then the numbers recalculate. Okay, just wanted to call that out because in some cases you may want to include it, and primarily as the note in the tooltip here shows, you might want to include it when you're doing situations like modeling a simple pro forma to support an exit scenario or something like that. Okay, if that's the case, then you might want to flip that to yes. So there's other information. There's another piece of summary information here, which is it may look like we're repeating the total holdings for an individual, but we're not. What we're doing is if somebody happens to have a follow-on grant, let's assume that this person got another 50,000 shares in the form of RSAs. So there's one row here in row 8 and another row in row 16 where this person has equity. By putting their name here in this summary, it will add up all of their holdings across all of the rows in the table above, both common stock as well as options, RSUs, warrants, etc. Okay. So that's the other summary table. There's another summary table here which breaks down primarily how many shares and what percentage has been issued out of the stock option pool, and that's going to be fairly significant when you are trying to model out a priced round, because the investors will typically look at this and ask for the startup to be able to top off the pool. You can see down here the amount of percentage fully diluted, the amount issued under the pool, and then the amount that's yet unissued. So in this situation, this particular startup has 5% unissued and 9.3% already issued out of a 14.3% total pool size. Okay, so that's nice to be able to see that. And then there's some summary information here, which again just summarizes shares common shares, preferred shares, RSAs, RSUs, options, etc. And it adds up to a very important information, which is why it's in red with yellow background, which is the number of fully diluted shares in the company. This is a very important piece of information. I have another YouTube video that discusses fully diluted shares, so I'm not going to get into it here. We can link to it in the description if you would like a more formal definition of what fully diluted shares is. This is a very important concept to understand what percentage of the company every stakeholder has. Note that the calculation of fully diluted shares here does not include unconverted convertible instruments like safes and convertible notes. Well, why is that significant? Well, let's look at the convertible note tab. Okay, so we have a separate tab here, worksheet for people who've hold convertible notes, convertible instruments, safes, convertible notes, KISSes, etc. So this is the stakeholder. Where's the stakeholder base, which is important for legal reasons. Okay, and then this here is the funding vehicle, whether they have a pre-money variant of the safe or the pre-money variant to the safe or the post-money variant, convertible note. There are some other types of convertible instruments that you can capture here. Then we have some financial details, the amount invested, the valuation cap, a conversion discount if one applies. And then probably one of the most useful reasons why we would have the spreadsheet is a simplified ownership stake. And this is where I want to be able to just call attention to. This is simplified. The calculation of how much equity a specific individual would have because of a convertible instrument. That calculation is complex and it is dependent typically on the assumed valuation of the qualified round of a preferred equity sale. Okay, so in other words, in order to estimate the what percentage of stock each convertible instrument holder might have, you have to make an assumption about the pre-money valuation on the preferred priced round. Okay, so if you take this right now, it's got a $12 million pre-money valuation. If you change it to $10 million, okay, you'll actually, let me change it to something more significant. Let's change it to $6 million. Okay, if we change it to $6 million, look very closely at the column I. You'll notice that some of the calculations, specifically Dinesh Daswani, his stake got bigger because the valuation got lower. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that real quick. So the moment I undo, keep an eye on Dinesh's stake, and you'll watch it change. You'll see it change. Okay. It goes back to a different calculation. Okay. Do note there is this yellow highlighted field here with red text. This is a very simple approximation. It should not be considered to be accurate because the actual math is very complex and it's beyond the scope of this simple spreadsheet. If you do have a priced round, or if you do want to do advanced modeling, I recommend you use the modeling tools in your cap table platform. Carta has the sandbox. Carta also has a modeling and waterfall calculation for actual priced rounds. Okay. Then, in addition to the financial information about each convertible instrument, there's some rights and privileges, as well as some legal information. Does the stakeholder have MFN rights, most favored nation, pro rata rights? When was that instrument issued? And again, also the board approval date. If the instrument is converted, when did it convert? What was the accrued interest, etc.? And if there's any other consideration or notes that we want to capture in regards to this particular instrument. So down here at the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and shrink some of these rows. Okay, so we have 4 convertible instruments, and down here we have a quick summary of what those convertible instruments will add up to. This is the fully diluted shares, excluding the convertibles, which is from the previous worksheet, the stock and options spreadsheet. Right here, 7 million. That's copied over to here. Then we have a simple estimate on the number of shares due should the these convertible instruments convert at this particular valuation, and the calculation is a rough estimate 124,000, which means the estimated number of fully diluted shares is here. Again, this is only an estimate. I make this very prominent because it should not be considered final or definitive. Okay, so that's basically the gist of the spreadsheet. There's a lot more low-level detail, which I'm not going to get into, but if you zoom out and take a overall view of the stock and options spreadsheet, you can kind of see there's a fair amount of information that's captured. Similarly, on the convertible instrument spreadsheet, you'll see a decent amount of info as well. So once again, this tool is meant to be a simple simple summary for readability purposes to help an investor and an attorney do a quick assessment on the state of the cap table. It is not meant to be definitive, authoritative, correct, accurate. If you're going to use this, you assume all risk as a result of using it. There's the standard disclaimer applies. Okay. So hopefully that is helpful. If you have any questions, please be sure to contact us through the information listed in the README. Thank you very much. Bye. Okay, we want to spend a moment here just talking about a quick summary of the features of this cap table. First, in terms of features related to the stock. Now, number one, the cap table will capture common, preferred, and restricted stock awards (RSAs). It will also do vesting calculations on the shares that have vesting attached to it. It captures the board approval date, the issuance price, the percentage outstanding and fully diluted, which are fairly important numbers to be able to understand. And it also captures 83B status. So this is all related to issuances that are stock. Okay, for the issuances related to stock options and other forms of future stock rights, number one, it captures the, as mentioned, as suggested, options, which includes incentive stock options and non-statutory options or non-qualified options, RSUs, restricted stock units, as well as warrants. Warrants are significant because not very many cap tables capture that, or not many cap table spreadsheets, I should say, capture that. It also does vesting calculations where applicable, captures the board approval date, the exercise price, and the percent of fully diluted, the portion of fully diluted of that specific holding. The stock and the options plus stock rights, the blue and the green, add up together to equal the purple, which gives you the total position per stakeholder, the total vested position per stakeholder as well. That's going to be important for to an investor. Okay, and then on the option pool, we have totals of granted and ungranted shares, as well as the distribution of the granted shares amongst across ISOs, NSOs, RSAs, and RSUs, all of which are typically granted from the option pool. Okay, then you have outstanding and fully diluted shares as part of the summary. As for the convertible instruments, this cap table spreadsheet will capture the type of convertible, pre-money safes, post-money safes, convertible notes, KISSes, both equity and debt variety. Okay, the financial terms for each of the convertible instruments, simplified ownership stake based on an assumed valuation, and estimated number of shares from the convertibles once these convertible instruments convert based on a priced equity round, and some legal diligence data as well as financial impact fields are also captured. So there's somewhere around 20 or so, 25 individual little features that are captured as part of this cap table spreadsheet, which is one of the reasons why the spreadsheet is more robust and it captures more of the information that a typical investor and a startup attorney would want to see. Again, does not replace a startup cap table tool like Carta, Equista, or Pulley, or any one of those tools, but it does at least organize a lot of this information in a nice, easy to use format, especially for due diligence purposes.